Hi, I'm Wendy Roberts, and welcome to our first recording of What's Up. We're calling it that because we want to know what's up in your lives that you might be struggling with. We want to look at the Word and say, what's up in the Word? Let's find biblical examples of things they struggled with back then that we are still facing today. Nothing new under the sun. We're still struggling with them, but we're going to see what we can do to help that. We're also going to look at what's up in reality. Can we really apply a word that happened so long ago to our lives today? The Lord is going to help us with these questions on today's topic of anger. So if you don't mind, we'll say a quick prayer and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you so much for all you are and do. I ask you to help me to only speak your word. I ask you to help me and others to come to know you better, to understand how to help in this situation, help us to overcome. We all have situations that can easily push our buttons and drive us to anger. But what we do with that and how we react to that and how we treat people is where we want to draw closer to you and do better at that. And that's what we're asking you to do. So Lord, we just pray that you just be with me and that only your words can come out. I thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Before we start looking at the biblical examples that we have, I would like to take a look at a couple of scriptures that are close to my heart in this subject. The first one that we're going to look at is actually Ephesians 6:12, and it just says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness in this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." And that's it again, Ephesians 12. So we have to remember when we have our buttons pushed, when we get driven to anger, that these people that are causing us to be angry, that they're just being used as a tool from the enemy. That sometimes it's not anything personal, even though it feels very personal. It could be an attack against you, attack against somebody you love. It could be a situation someone cut you off on the road. Whatever the situation may be, we have to remember that there's a fleshly side and there is a spiritual side of everything that we go through. And a lot of times it is the enemy just trying to get up under our skin, to steal our joy, to cause us to have issues, to get us angry, to break up those relationships, to cause us to lose our jobs, whatever the situation may be. It's an attack of the enemy when it comes down to it. So we want to try to remember that. The next thing we want to look at real quick in the Word is over here in Romans, and I'm looking at Romans 12, verse 20. And it says, "Therefore, if thine enemy hungers, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good." So the Word in many areas helps us to know how we can defeat the adversary, to neutralize a situation, to diffuse a situation. And that's for praying for our enemies. If you see they have need, if there's something you can do to help them, help them. If someone angers you, if I anger you, please forgive me and pray for me. And let's don't browbeat each other. We all have opportunity to get angry, but again, how we choose to deal with that anger is completely between you and God. But hopefully we'll have some good information for you that might be able to help you in your path of overcoming anger as well. The last scripture I'm just going to highlight, I'm not going to read it word for word, it's Matthew 5:44. It's talking about loving your enemies. It's talking about doing good to those that curse you. It's talking about bless those that curse you, do good to those that hate you, and pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. And it's hard when you're under persecution to just turn the other cheek or to give it to God, especially when you feel like it literally is only you and God. God does say that, vengeance is His, that He's the one that fights our battles for us. We're to give it over to Him. Sometimes in reality that is hard, especially if you're in the midst of your storm and under attack, especially when it comes to your kids. I'm Mama Bear when it comes to my kids, and I know they're grown now, but that don't mean Mama Bear don't still get angry when someone messes with their kids. But just know that that's natural for a person to get. It's okay to be angry and sin not, and that's what we want to learn. That's what we want to learn, to not just lash out. So now that we've looked at some actual scriptures on how we can do this, we're going to talk about some biblical examples. Now, I'm just going to speak general. There's way too much ground to cover, and for time's sake, I'm going to speak general about the examples that I'm giving you, but I am going to give you the places where they can be found, and I encourage you to look them up. Read the stories for yourself from start to finish, because we want you to get this. We want you to understand this. We want you to be able to be blessed by this. And the general information that I give is nowhere near the blessed information God will give you if you just read the word yourself. So the first thing that we're going to look at as a biblical example, because there's different types of anger. So that's, I guess, what I'm trying to highlight here. There are different types of angers and different situations that trigger different things in us. And the first one I want to look at is a jealous anger. That example that I want to look at for a jealous anger is actually found in Genesis 4, 1 through 8. Again, read it all, but it's talking about how Cain killed his brother Abel out of jealousy. Now, what led up to that, I again encourage you to read it for yourself, but basically, these two brothers, one did the garden and the tilling, the work of the land. The other one, it talks about an animal sacrifice, so I'm not going to try to assume, but he gave a firstling, a first example, his best offering. The Lord looked at both of them and respected Abel's offering, and it said the Lord did not respect Cain's offering. Now there's a reason for that, and I again encourage you to read it for yourself, but the reason behind it was a heart intention. It's like, are you going to tip God, or are you going to give him your best? And that's what it kind of boils down to. So because of this, it drove him to anger out of his jealousy, and he killed his own brother. There's consequences to our actions and to our words. And if we let that anger grow in us, it can be devastating. You can do something you'll highly regret and have big consequences to it. The next type of anger we're going to talk about is defensive anger. The example we're going to look at is actually in Exodus 2. Read that story. But it is about how Moses ended up killing someone during a fight to defend a slave that ended up being his brother. Now the story talks about how when he was a baby, there was someone that was, there was a major killing went out, and all the Hebrew boys were killed at that age. But to save him, his mother hid him in a basket, floated him down the river, and Pharaoh that actually put the hit out, the king that put the hit out on all these small infants, his daughter was actually at that river, found the baby, just loved the baby, which was Moses, and ended up adopting the baby. He was able to grow up as royalty with the Egyptians, so he didn't have that fear. He had money and riches, whatever the king and his daughter could provide for him. He had everything. But as he grew up, he started learning the truth of his people. The truth is that his Hebrew people were highly mistreated by the Egyptians. They were beat. They were slaves. They had to work for next to nothing. There's so many examples of their slavery. But he saw his own people being slaves by the people that raised him, which were the Egyptians. And at one particular situation, he saw one of the Egyptian soldiers, it said smiting one of the Hebrew men, so beating, trying to kill him, whatever smiting means, I'm assuming beating. And it said, though, that Moses looked to the right, to the left. He made sure nobody was watching him, so it was premeditated. But he ended up, he fought that Egyptian, and he ended up killing him. Well, he went. It said that he hid the body in the sand. So the next day, that same Hebrew, his real kin, man, and another one, it says two were along the wayside, he saw them fighting each other for whatever reason. And he asked them, like, why are y'all fighting? And that one that knew because he was there and saw it, he said, "What are you going to do? Kill me like you did the Egyptian?" So he knew then, word was out, he knew that he was caught, that even though he tried to hide the body in the sand, it didn't work. So now Pharaoh was after to kill him, so he ran. So again, sin has consequences, anger has consequences, but he was in defense. He was defending his kinsmen, his family, his true family, and his whole life was a lie. So I can only imagine that when he started, and again, I'm imagining, so I'm not saying this is what the word says, but if it were me and I was raised a certain way my whole life, and then I start finding out all this information, I can only imagine that built up some anger. And then to see my family getting abused and beat, yeah, that's gonna ruffle some feathers. So there's different things that we can do, because we can't help how we feel, but we can help how we act. So we want to just talk about the consequences, and what I guess one thing I want to highlight is what the enemy means for harm, God does mean for good. Each of these situations that we've looked at, even though there was some bad that went with it, eventually God did turn things to good. Now the last example we'll look at is righteous anger. The only pure and righteous anger example that just really magnifies in the Bible is Jesus. Whenever he was angry and sinned not, but yet he turned over tables and chairs in the temple. Now, I highly recommend you read this story. This is one that you do need to read for yourself, because I don't want to make it sound like it's okay for us to get upset and start throwing over tables, because that's not what this is about. Matthew 21 discusses how Jesus saw people in authority that knew better doing the things that they shouldn't be doing right there in the temple and taking advantage of God's people. He reminded them that the temple was to be a house of prayer, yet they had turned it into a den of thieves. Read this story and see why and how Jesus reacted to the situation. The word says we can be angry and sin not. The word also says that Jesus never sinned. Jesus actually turned over tables and seats of the ones doing wrong in the temple. Jesus had authority to do this as God's Son. If you read at the beginning of Matthew 21, you'll see that the people had just shown an open display of his authority as they fulfilled the prophecy as the king coming meekly, sitting on the donkey, and the people singing Hosanna to the highest, as he was paraded through the town and highly honored. He comes into the temple basically after he gets off the donkey. He comes into the temple and just find this corrupt situation happening in the temple. So he had the authority to make this correction as God's Son. Now, and he immediately corrected. But we aren't Jesus. If we do something like this, we had better know that we know that we know that we have the authority to do it and that God led us to do it. So I'm not saying go and do what Jesus did and get mad and throw a table. That's totally not what I'm saying here. Excuse me. But we can learn from Jesus in so many ways. He is our example, and there is a righteous way to handle our anger. Now that we've looked at some examples of anger in the Bible that we face today, I'd like to introduce to you a special guest that will be telling his testimony and sharing how God helped him to overcome issues of anger in his life. Although he is younger than me, I grew up around this young brother in church, and I very much look up to him as my little brother in faith. Micah Johnson? Please join us. Hello.
How are
Good
you?
to see you. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm blessed.
Yes. So, what's up, Micah? With these examples that I've discussed, is there anything you'd like to add to or share in that portion of it before we start getting into your testimony?
Well, when you were talking about Jesus, flipping the tables and stuff, that's not the only time Jesus got angry. He also got angry one time when the fig tree didn't have any fruit on it, and he cursed that fig tree and it died. I think a lot of times we should look at that kind of as our Christian walk. A lot of times we see people, meet people that are hungry for Jesus, and we don't bear that fruit that we should be bearing. And I think that is a curse upon our own life, and I think we need to be careful of that. But I had a lot of issues with anger growing up because of the way I was taught. My dad was a preacher and stuff, but he was very, very, very strict about everything. We wasn't allowed to say certain words. We wasn't allowed to wear certain clothes. We wasn't allowed to do most of the things that, you know, the other kids could do. Like we wasn't allowed to do anything with Halloween. We wasn't allowed to dress up. We wasn't allowed to go to parties or, you know, just all kinds of stuff. And therefore it built up a lot of anger and animosity inside of my life. And I also, as a young Christian growing up and watching my father being a pastor, everybody says, oh, well, you're just a preacher's kid, this and that. Well, I watched everybody through a magnifying glass. You know, I always watched every move everyone made all the time because I thought that Christians were supposed to be perfect. And Christians aren't perfect.
No.
You know, and that's where we all mess up as Christians in our walk with Christ is, you know, that even, I don't know what I'm really trying to say, but the Lord kind of led me to say that everyone looks at us through a microscope.
They do.
And that's one thing we have messed up as Christians also, is we look at each other through a microscope.
Yes.
We don't allow any kind of room for anything to be messed up in our lives. You know, we expect everything to be perfect, to be on point, to be like this piece of paper, everything's in orderly fashion. You know, sometimes life doesn't come in order. Sometimes, you know, somebody pulls out in front of you or cuts you off or whatnot, you know, and a lot of times as Christians, if we would bless that person and blow the horn and say, God bless you, you know, our lives would be up here. And if we ever figured out what God has in store for us and the power we hold in our hand, that's what's wrong with the world. You know, that's Satan. That's why he uses your kids and your wife and people at your work and everything else, because he knows what you're capable of. And that's where we're messed up, because we don't even know what we're capable of as Christians. In the Bible, I forget exactly what scripture, but Jesus said that when he goes to the heaven and comes back, that we'll have the same power and authority that he had and more. And you know, Satan knows that. It scares him to death. But one of my favorite scriptures, the one you said, I quote it all the time, Ephesians 6 and 12. But also Ephesians 4 and 26 says, Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. You know, we can get angry and not cuss. I get mad all the time. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I own a construction company. I'm always hitting my hand with a hammer.
Yes.
Or like today, I went to the Home Depot or somewhere and got some materials and came back, and these guys had cut all the rafters wrong.
Oh no.
And so, you know, I didn't cuss. I didn't tell them, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you don't know how to run a saw, I'm docking your pay. I didn't say none of that stuff. I just simply said, guys, this looks like a hobbled up mess, and we need to take it all back off and fix it because my name's on this. You know, that's the way we should be as Christians. We should be patient and kind. You can ask my wife or my kids. I promise you, I get angry, and I probably say things that I shouldn't say. You know, right here, where is it? James chapter 1, verse 19 says, Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. Well, let me tell you something. I'm not swift to hear. I'm not slow to speak, and I'm not slow to wrath, because I'm very quick-witted. You can ask my wife. If somebody smarts off, I'm quick. I mean, before I even think about it, sometimes my mouth flies open and I smart off.
Yes.
It's the way I was raised. That's how my family is, and I like burning people. You know, I mean, I don't understand you know, everything about the Bible or anything else, but in 2 Timothy it says we need to study and show ourselves approved. And that's one of the main problems as Christians, is we preach opinions and we don't preach the gospel.
Yes.
And if we would quit changing these scriptures to fit our life,
yes,
to mold around the way we feel it should fit our life, then I believe that we would earn a lot more of the power that God gave us to begin with. But Also in Ephesians 4:31, which is right after the other scripture, it says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." It's not saying that you've got to be perfect, but it's saying watch every move you make. Watch out. A lot of times as Christians, we put ourselves in predicaments we shouldn't be in to begin with.
Yeah.
We put ourselves in places that we shouldn't be as far as work or friends. I know a lot of Christians, they'll come off of drugs or alcoholism or whatever, and they'll be like, "Well, I'm going to go down here to the bar and I'm going to preach." Well, let me tell you something. You might go down there to the bar and you might preach a few times, but eventually that demon or that spirit or whatever it may have been that caused you to sin in the beginning may start coming back up in your life if you're not very, very, very careful.
Yes.
And like you said with Jesus getting angry, he knew what he was doing, but he was also sin-free.
Yes.
And therefore he knew that it didn't matter what they thought of him. See, that's where we mess up as well. As Christians, we always worried about what somebody sees in us.
Yes.
We're not worried about, let's be careful how I say this, but
because that's like a double-edged sword. You don't want to tempt somebody or
right.
have them think bad or that a Christian can do bad. Where I've heard your dad say this, that if somebody saw him walking out of a bar, he would hope they would think the best, that he was in there praying for somebody or picking up somebody so they wouldn't drive.
You know good and well that's not what they're going to think.
That's right, and that it's a double-edged sword. So it's like you don't want people to think, "I just stumbled out of a bar."
Well, it was just like Jesus, he healed the lepers, the blind, the sick, the deaf, the this, the that, and they still made him. They were like, "Crucify him," because they couldn't handle the perfection, the sin-free lifestyle, because it changed everything in their life and pointed fingers at them.
Yeah.
They don't like them pointing fingers at them. They want to point fingers at everyone else to get the attention off of them. And even I have people tell me all the time, "Hey, we look up to you, we this, we that." But I also have a lot of people say, "We know who you used to be."
Yes.
And I'm not who I used to be. I died to that person. And I used to be angry. I used to ride around, I'm not going to lie. We used to ride around Atlanta, Cleveland, Calhoun, wherever we could go just to find somebody to fight. We liked it. It was fun, And you can ask my wife. She's been in the store before and people flirting with her, and she's like, "I'm married." They're like, "Who are you married to?" And she'll tell them my name, and she said they've literally ran away. And she was like, "Who did you used to be?" I was like, "I don't want to talk about that person no more because that's not who I am."
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one is perfect. Jesus was the only one that was perfect, and we crucified him. But, even though Jesus fed the thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fishes, they turned around and started across the lake, and they said, "Lord," he gives them one loaf of bread, and he said, "Don't eat the bread over there because it's been tampered with pretty much."
Yep.
And they said, "But what are we going to eat? We only got one loaf of bread." And he looks at them like, "Are you stupid? We just fed 7,000 people with a couple of loaves. How long can you eat with one loaf of bread? If you think about it, where's your faith?" And that's one of our problems as Christians, is we have no faith. God could come out of the sky, slap us in the face and say, "Hey, I'm real. Go back to heaven, and tomorrow we're going to say, all right, well, where's the sign for today at?
Yeah.
I need another sign. I need more. I want something more,
Yes.
We can't grasp the
reality
that
is ongoing.
He's already showed you all this stuff,
Yeah.
but it wasn't ever good enough. We want more for tomorrow. We want more for today. We want more for the next day.
I'm guilty of saying, my today's problem was worse than yesterday. So, I know it's like I have to sometimes just literally, like the old song talk about count your blessings, name them one by one, like the song says. I have to remind myself that God got me through this victory. God got me through this victory. I was keeping a prayer report, or prayer request and praise report list. If I got an answered prayer, I'd check it off because I had to. The word says, "Stir yourself up daily." That's how I stirred myself up, was remembering that God, answered those prayers. And one thing, if you don't mind me saying, when you a lot of what you're saying is talking about other people, is that if we would extend that same mercy and grace that Jesus extends to us, we would probably do a lot better off.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing you say. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
highlighting.
Well, you know, it just boils down to one thing. If God says that we have 10 commandments to follow, but really there was only 2.
Yes.
And He says if we'll love God with all of our heart, mind, strength, soul, and everything, well, really not our strength, because we're supposed to love Him in our weakness. He is our strength.
Amen.
But if we'll love Him with everything that's in us, and if we'll love our brother, our neighbor, like we love ourselves, we wouldn't have none of the other issues to begin with. Because you think about it, and everybody always wants to point that finger at someone else or whatever, or they want more for themselves. It's always a selfish, I call it a spirit. I think it's a spirit because in Ephesians 6 and 12 it talks about that. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities of darkness. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I've had issues. You can ask my wife. We've had issues with certain people in our churches over the years and whatnot. And I'll tell her, I'll say, I'm not going to say nothing, but I'm going to go in my closet. And the Bible talks about that. A lot of people, we want to be like the Pharisees, we want to jump up on the stage and be like, I've been fasting, I've been doing this, I've been doing that, hey, look at me. And the Bible says not to do that, because that is our reward.
Yeah.
When you get up there and holler and scream about it, everybody claps for you, that's all you get. You're done.
Yep.
But anyways, I'll go in my closet. When she goes to sleep, you can ask her, I've woke her up in my closet preaching pretty much. With the door closed 11:30, 12 o'clock at night because I can't sleep. The Lord wake me up in the middle of the night or whatever, and I'll go in there and I'll get on my face in my closet and I'll pray. Well, I did this for about 2 weeks one time. And I walk into the church, and this lady I'd been having a lot of issues with, just real bossy, real snappy. Just I walk in the church, and she walks up, and she's like, hey, brother, I'm going to let you lead praise and worship today, and you just sing what you want to and whatever chord you want to sing it in. And I'm just going to sit back here and enjoy the service. And
You'll make
walked off.
your enemies be at peace with you.
And all of us went, you know, we was like, oh, my Lord. And within a couple seconds, someone else walked up, and they're like, brother, we're really proud of you, and this and that, and walked off. And I was like, and that was another person I was having an issue with, and I said, that's what the Bible talks about.
Yes.
If we'll put all of our issues at the Father's feet, yes, He will take care of our battles for us. And yes, the older I get, I've been going to church for over 30 years on and off, and I've learned more in the past year than I have in the other 30 plus combined.
Oh, that's
Simply because I've been studying on my own, I've been in my closet praying, and I've got relationship, not religion no more.
Yes.
And that's another issue we've had in the church house, you know, is everybody wants that religion.
Yeah.
I'm a Church of Christ, I'm this, I'm Baptist, I'm Pentecostal, I'm this. What? No. If we would quit basing our church off of 4 walls,
Yes.
because we're supposed to be the church
Yeah.
as a body, you know, of Christ. And that's one of the other main issues, like I was talking about to begin with. We're always worried about pointing fingers instead of building each other up.
Yes.
If we would build each other up instead of cutting each other down, the church would be as one. And if we'd all get on one mind and one accord like that, we would see revival in the land like we've never seen it before.
I agree.
And in the old times, they had revival like that, and that was why. It was because they were all seeking that.
Yeah.
They were all praying for it. They were all on one mind
sincere,
and one accord.
Yes.
And a lot of people thinks that one mind and one accord is the sinners and the Christians, and that's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about if all the Christians would get on one mind and one accord and find out how much power we really possess, then we would see that revival we've been looking for.
Yes.
I've had a lady here lately, she come up to me at church and she said, God told me to tell you that you have a spirit of healing. He's going to give you a spirit of healing. And I was at my job site one day, and this lady pulled up to pay my mom for some onions. I know it's just something simple, you know, but she gets out and she couldn't even walk. She was like crying, almost in pain. She said, my leg's been hurting for a year, and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, I had my tool belt on. I've been putting a roof on or siding on or something. I don't even remember what I was doing at the time now. And I said, ma'am, can I pray for you? And she was like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, whatever. She's a church-going Christian.
Yeah.
But
I was almost surprised.
no, she just is one of those Christians that don't know what kind of power we
Power.
really possess.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
she is, I'm not trying to say this rude about her or nothing else. I love her to death. But she just had seen so many other Christians cutting people down throughout the years that you kind of lose your faith in your own brethren. I mean, really.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's one reason I hated Christians for a long time. You know, when I turned 18, I walked away from churches, from Christians. I hated them. I didn't want nothing to do with them. They were fake. They were hypocrites. They're always out to stab each other in the back. I didn't want nothing to do with it. I'll just be honest with you. I hated them. They was always talking about each other. They was always fake. I'd see them in church on Sunday, and I'd see them in the bar on Saturday. You know, it was just always something. And it really frustrated me.
Yeah.
Because I knew the power of God, because I've been overseas. I've been to Bulgaria, I've been to Romania and Switzerland and Austria, and I've seen people healed of the blind. I mean, blind people healed. But here's the thing. When you go to overseas, I've seen these memes on Facebook and different things of these homeless men under bridges. And it says, hey, preacher man, why are you going on mission trips overseas when you have homeless right here? Well, I'll tell you why they do it. And that's another one I'm talking about. You know, that's another pointing of the fingers right there. But I see a lot of those Christians sharing it. But here's the thing. When you step out of this country, you see people that appreciate stuff that we don't.
Yeah.
We don't appreciate water. I could take that water out right now and dump it in the floor, and nobody on this video would think nothing about it. But I could take that bottle of water to another country, and they might cut off one of their toes for that bottle of water, because they might not get water but once a week. Wow. They may turn on their water once a week. You may have to pay equivalent to a couple of dollars in the U.S. just to use their restroom. Or you may have to pay $1 or whatever in U.S. currency over there to get 3 or 4 sheets of toilet paper. You walk up and down the streets over there and you see pipes of sewage coming out into the rivers, and then men sitting on those pipes fishing for dinner. You know, I mean, it's just things that would kill us, would literally kill us. They have goats and animals hanging out on their porches for months at a time in heat like we've been having it, you know, today in the middle of May. And you know, just things that would kill Americans, literally, if we ingested them or even if we drank their water over there, it would literally kill us. The mites or the bugs or parasites or worms or whatever. And, you know, but when you get over there and you say, hey, we're going to have church tonight. Well, in America, you say we're going to have church tonight, and everybody's going to say, I'm going to go to the mall because I ain't going over there with them bunch of hypocrites. Well, when you go to Bulgaria and you say, we're going to have church tonight, let me tell you something. Them people jump up and split the house and take off running, hollering, beating on doors.
Aww.
And within 30 minutes, you got people lined up down the road wanting prayer.
Glory.
And that's the difference. That's why the preachers go overseas, is because they're
hungry.
They're on one mind and one accord. They're hungry. They're wanting to know this Jesus.
Yes.
They don't take it for advantage, you know. They don't take advantage of it.
Right.
The best thing I can tell you about anger is pray. If you have an issue, like I said, I still get angry, but I don't cuss. I don't used to. If I got mad, I'd walk through that wall right there. I'd make my own door. Literally, I'd headbutt and beat my way through it. And that's just, I used to be crazy. I mean, I guess you could say that. I may have had a spirit on me. I'm not sure. I liked violence. And my wife calls me pig man because we go hunt hogs with knives and dogs, and we enjoy the thrill of it. But, you know, channeling that anger and finding different avenues on how to use it also helps a lot. I've had to take anger management over the years and different things, and they teach you different ways to deal with your anger, which it never did help me, but God helped me. Jesus helped me. Once I got on my knees, once I really give my heart back to Jesus, He took away my heart of stone and gave me a heart of flesh. You know, for 15 years, I probably didn't cry.
I love you.
I love you too. And now I can cry at the drop of a hat, but for 15 years, probably I've seen my grandmother die, and I stood over her coffin with my hands crossed because I thought that made a wimp of you. I didn't want anybody to see me cry. I didn't want anybody to see me have emotions. But, you know, when Jesus comes into your heart and He takes away all your anger and all your wrath, and He gives you another chance, even though you've done drugs and And another thing, I should be in prison. You know, I got in 2 fights. I was 17 years old, I guess. And this kid wanted to fight me, and I went back up to the house that I dropped this person off at. And he comes out and he's bouncing around the yard, and it's real dark. It was raining. There wasn't no lights on. And he took off a metal watch, but all I heard was that click. That's all I heard. I didn't know if it was a hammer on a gun, a knife blade opening up, or what. And I hit this guy, and I broke his jaw and knocked 3 of his teeth real loose and split his mouth, and his jaw was literally over here on his shoulder. And he was having seizures and convulsions, and I thought I killed him. And he had to wear this, it was some type of thing, I think they call it a halo or something. They screw it into your skull, and then they screw it into your jaw and hold it in place for 6 weeks or whatnot. He came to school like that every day and drank lunch out of a straw and stuff. And between that and then, you know, a couple years down the road, this other kid, I was literally defending him. His brother had thrown him through a glass coffee table, and I said something trying to defend the kid. And
Defensive anger, yeah.
And hit him twice, and he went to the hospital in an ambulance. And both of those times, literally, one wrong move, either one of those guys could have literally died. I have what we call country strength. I mean, I was raised on a farm. We flipped bales of hay out to our cows. We didn't have a tractor until I was 17, 18 years old. And we've wrestled cattle and pigs and horses and whatever, you know, my whole life. And I'm just a country strong boy, and I didn't realize it until I got older. But I mean, I like to kill these guys, not even meaning to, you know.
Yeah.
And looking back on it now, you know, as a father, if one of my kids were to be in that predicament, it's scary. I mean, it really is. Because our son is really big. He's nearly 300 pounds, wears 17 in a shoe.
Oh my.
And I have to tell him constantly, son, be careful with your anger. Because as big as you are, you could literally, because I come home from work one day, he had 285 pounds on the bench press machine, and I was like, son, let me help you. You know, he's like, Dad, I'm just warming up.
Wow.
And you know, as a big man, I'm 6'3", 220 pounds. My son's 6'1", 6'2", and almost 300 pounds. We're just strong. You don't realize how strong you really are. But you have to be careful with your anger. You have to be careful with your words. Because, you know, you always heard that growing up. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And that's right backwards. Because let me tell you something. Some of the things I remember the most as a kid growing up was things that my mom and dad would say to each other in fights and arguments they would get in, or dad would get mad and leave, or I've seen him do things that were not, you know, Christian at all. And I remember those things. Even though I was 2 or 3 or 4 years old, it had a huge impact on me as a child. And my dad took us all over the place because he had a carpet mill and he had a little bit of money there at one time. And so we did a lot of traveling, a lot of tourism, whatever you want to call it, I guess. But we was blessed enough to go overseas and do a couple things. But, you know, in going to all these different states, the Redwood Forest, Bulgaria, Switzerland, seeing the Swiss Alps and seeing all this different stuff, some of the things that stick out in my mind that I can play for back on those memories like they happened yesterday were the violent things, the bad things. And you know what? That's why I always tell kids and people to be careful with your anger, because those things stick out to children more than the good things. You can do 1,000,000 things right, and you can do one thing bad, and everybody will talk about the one thing that was bad, and they'll never forget it. They'll remember what color shirt you was wearing, what color pants you were wearing, what kind of hat you had on, and why you done it, but they might not remember the 12 states you took them through the day before or whatever. So it's just, you know, as a Christian, you don't got to be perfect. But you do have to be careful. You have to be smart. You have to be obedient, and you have to die to self and give God everything that you have, everything you possess. You can ask my wife when we first got together. She was a Baptist growing up. I have nothing against Baptists at all, I promise. But she was just raised in a huge Baptist church in Knoxville, like thousands of people. And so she came to church with me one day, and they were ripping and roaring. It was just one of them great services that the Spirit was moving.
Pentecostal, yes.
And she was like, what in the world was that? Well, not long after that, we'd been paying tithes, and she was like, we got 7 kids. We got 7 kids together, and we had all 7 living with us at the time. And she was like, we can't give $80 this week. We only have $100 left. And you're telling me to give $80, and we've got to have gas in both vehicles. You've got to go to work all week. I've got to take the kids to school all week. I've got to pick them up. Da, 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 da. I said, no, we're giving $80. Whatever the 10% is, we're giving it. And sure enough, one time we were broke. I mean, we were broke. When we first got together, we'd eat ramen noodles, and I make all kinds of stuff. And I could go on for hours about things that we had to go through to get by when we first got together. But one day we was leaving the house to go ask for an extension on our power bill. I'll never forget it. And the Lord spoke to me, and He said, check the mailbox. And she said, I checked the mail yesterday. And I said, I don't care, He's telling me to check the mailbox again. And she opened up the mailbox, and there was a letter stood up on the side of the mailbox. And she opened it up, and it was a letter from unemployment.
Oh.
From where she had applied like 3 or 4 months prior to that. And let me tell you something.
Wow.
The check for the unemployment was to the penny what the power bill was.
Oh, glory.
It wasn't $1 more. It wasn't $1 less. It wasn't a penny more, a penny less. I promise you. It was like, if I'm not mistaken, it was $143.51 for the power bill, and the check for the unemployment was $143.51.
So that's like God saying, you know that this
and
is
ever since that day, my wife has never once said a word to me about paying her tithes.
Amen. Because God will come through.
And
that's for sure.
Our daughter last year, we spent probably 6 months out of the last year in T.C. Thompson. And that was another really change in our lives, because I love my wife and she loves me, and we're neither one perfect. I have issues, she has issues, but she has an issue with what we were talking about earlier. She wants everything to be in order a certain way all the time, because that's just the way she wants it. And so when McKinley was sick, she didn't have any control over that, and it drove her crazy.
Yes.
Well, I couldn't work. We've got buku of kids, and one of them's in T.C. Thompson. Somebody's got to stay there with her 24/7, and somebody's got to take care of the other ones. And so the only times I could really work was when they had school.
Yeah.
And a lot of this time that we were in T.C. Thompson, we're in the middle of the summer. We don't have no help hardly out of my mom, my dad, her mom, or her family or nothing. So needless to say, I stayed at home a lot. She stayed at the hospital, and on the weekends I'd go stay at the hospital, and back and forth, and I didn't get to work much, so we struggled.
Yeah.
And make a long story short, we'd go to church, and we'd give what we had, like the woman at the well. We didn't have much, but Lord, here's a seed. We want you to bless it.
Yeah.
Whatever your will may be, Lord, have your way. And we would have people come up, Wendy, and be like, here's your check. Put that in your pocket. Don't look at it till later. And we'd be at the store, and people would walk up and hand us a check. God said, give you this. People we didn't even know.
Glory.
And one time, I'll never forget, we owed, was it $3,000 for her? She had to have chemo. And they said, well, you got to come up with $3,000 before next week.
Oh, my.
And I'd worked maybe 2 or 3 hours, that week. And so we was at church, and this lady come up, and she's like, God said to give you this. I opened it up, and it was $1,000. And I said, oh.
Wow.
I folded it up, give it to her. I said, well, there's some of it. If nothing else, we may have to turn around and give that back in offering as a seed. And we left church. And before I made it home, my dad called, and he said, hey, could you meet me at Ramhurst down here at the red light? I said, yeah, because it's close to my house, in between my house and his. Mm-hmm. I said, sure, I'll meet you. And he pulled in there and handed me a letter. He said, some lady gave me this and told me to give it to you. Somebody you don't know, and I don't really know her either. I said, okay, and I ripped it open and opened it up, $1,000.
Glory.
So I give it to Alyssa. And I'm not sure exactly where the other 1,000 came from, but I'm pretty sure it was another person. Anyway, someone else wrote us $1,000. Was it someone else wrote us $1,000 check?
It was a GoFundMe.
Oh, a GoFundMe account.
Okay.
They sent us a check for, it was right at $1,000 after they took out their part of it. But, we might not see God's plan, and we might not understand why He does the things the way He does them. But there's a reason.
Yes.
I don't know how anybody could not believe in Him. But let me tell you something. I used to be very, very violent and mean and this and that. But after I had kids, God changed me. But last year when I stayed for 6 months and T.C. Thompson was my kid on and off, I watched these other parents go through things that I couldn't imagine going through. Even though my daughter was sick, and even though we had to give her all these shots, and she took chemo and her hair fell out almost, all these things were happening, it still didn't compare to the little kid beside us on the morphine drip because his mama was a heroin addict, or, the methadone drip, or the kid over here that didn't have no hair at all and was only asking for a certain stuffed teddy bear or whatever before she died, or,
Oh, man.
there were so many of these kids just falling like flies. And here we are griping because my kid didn't get valedictorian at their school, or my kid didn't get picked for the baseball team, or whatever. That kind of anger is wrong. That's selfish anger.
Yeah.
That's very wrong. We need to quit being selfish. We need to quit pointing fingers. We need to start building each other up as Christians and start showing love. For the love of God drives out all fear, all anger, all everything. And if we would really show love like Jesus meant for us to be, and how Jesus and God is, that's all they are, is love.
Yeah.
We portray God as sitting up on a cloud with a pitchfork striking people dead left and right, and a lot of people. And I've got a brother, his name's Adam, a brother in Christ. His name's Adam, and he said that was one reason he was an atheist for 20-something years. Was he was scared of the hellfire and brimstone. He said no one had ever told me that God loved me. He said all I'd ever heard at church was God's going to kill you if you screw up. And he said I was afraid to breathe wrong. He said so I ran away from the church as far as I could get away from it. And I can understand that because growing up, like I said earlier, I wasn't allowed to do many of the things these kids nowadays are allowed to do. And I think like I said, if we would quit pushing our opinions and start pushing the gospel and the love of Christ, I don't think we would see all these issues with anger that we see nowadays.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it would go away.
And not just at people, but you got to be careful or not for some that gets mad at God. I'm guilty of it too in my past,
Oh, yeah.
and it's like,
What does the Bible say about it?
yeah.
It says the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But see, the devil spins stuff around and makes it look like God did it.
Yeah.
I hear people say a lot that, and I'm going to ruffle some feathers, and that's all right. Oh, we're already speaking on the topic of anger, so let's get some people angry, I guess. But God didn't take your kid
Right.
or your loved one or nothing else. That'd be the devil.
Yes.
Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And a lot of people don't. I've spoken to Christians about that, and you can ask my wife, a friend of mine's wife, that we've been very close friends. We go fishing every weekend during the summer and stuff all the time. We did for years, 5 or 10 years. Unfriended me on Facebook, blocked me and everything else because I simply told her that Satan is the one that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and that my Bible tells me that God did not kill her daughter, that she is with God, and that He welcomed her and loved her and wanted her to be there, but He didn't bring her there.
Right.
And she was like, well, what did Satan do to Job? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. When Satan walked up to Jesus and he said, or Jesus said, what about my servant Job? She said, okay. I said, did Jesus say, or did God say, you can do whatever you want to? And she said, well, yeah. I said, no. He said that you can take everything he possesses, but don't touch his life.
Right.
I said, because Satan already has that authority. God had to take it away from him. When God told him, you can take anything he has, but don't take his life. That's because Satan done had that authority.
Yeah.
And if Satan isn't fighting you, and you're not going through any battles, and you're not getting angry every once in a while, it's probably because you're already on the wrong team to begin with. Because Satan's not going to fight for something that's already his.
Ooh, that's good. That's right. Well, Micah, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But thank you. You are a blessing. Through lots of prayers, we have to try our best to be angry and sin not, or when we're angry to sin not try our best to be angry. That totally come out wrong. But to be angry and sin not. We aren't to keep that anger inside. We are to follow the word's examples. We are to overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Amen.
And I thank you for, I know you've talked about some pretty personal stuff, and I really appreciate you doing that for us. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, you're welcome to share them in the comment section. I'll do my best to get those answered. I'm going to be sharing this on Facebook. My name is Wendy Roberts. And
Can I say one more thing
Yes.
before we close?
Yes.
One more thing. If you do have an anger issue or you have issues in your personal life, find someone that is godly and that will give you godly advice.
Yes.
Don't go out here and tell Joe Blow on the side of the street, because he's going to turn around and tell everybody everything about
Yes.
you. But we have some friends of ours have been having a lot of issues in their personal life, and he said that Satan was beating him down. He said, I was like literally ready to quit coming to church, period, ever again. And he said, I told you something, and he said, I knew immediately when you went home that you were praying for me. He said, because I felt the peace of God come over me.
Good.
And he said, ever since you've been praying with me and I come out and told you, he said, I've told one or two other brothers. He said, because once I told you, I felt that peace and that burden be lifted. He said, so then God told me to tell a couple of my other brethren that I go to church with. He said, I told them, and he said, man, it was no time. He said, I was over it. He said, I was done, I was happy again. So I just want to tell you, be careful who you tell your issues to if you have them. But find someone you can trust and talk to them. Don't hold that stuff in, because that was my issue for many, many years, is not trusting anyone enough to talk to them. And it ate at me for years. I mean, it tore me down. It tortured me. The devil tormented me with that selfishness, I guess you could say, of worrying about that pride, like I was telling you about being a cow. I felt like a coward if I cried or whatever, But once I found a couple of Christians that I talked to, and they started praying for me and praying with me and stuff, and I give everything back over to my Father, that's when my life really changed for the better. And I just wanted to point that out before we stopped here, because a lot of people feel like when they talk to somebody, they just call their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, their whoever. And you can't just call anybody. You have to find somebody that really is somebody that spends time on their knees, that really is into the Word, because I know a lot of Christians that I wouldn't tell nothing to.
Yeah. And that's what
Christians.
and that's what I was fixing to say too, is if someone does confide in you, you better hold your tongue. You better go to God only in prayer. Or if it's something that you want to help them with, and you've studied the Word, and it's not up to you to help them, it's up to God to help them. If you do repeat something, which I don't recommend you doing, but let's say my daughter had a problem and I didn't know what to do. I may go to my pastor, but really I would encourage that person to go to their pastor. But if they're not in church and they're refuse to seek any other counsel, if you do have to in some way get somebody else involved carefully, you still don't want to betray their trust without betraying their trust.
Well, you can still do it without repeating names too.
Exactly.
You say, hey, I've got a sister in Christ that needs prayer for lust or whatever it may be, without saying her name, instead of saying, hey, Haley's been doing this. I would, you don't have to go out all the way through that, because God knows if that person's praying with you for someone, that God knows who it is. God knows every hair on our head. The same God that lives in you lives in me. And therefore, if I have an issue, it speaks about it in the Bible, you can know about it.
Yeah.
God can tell you.
And we're to help each other with our burdens.
You can ask my wife here a couple of weeks ago, my back, just all of a sudden I was laying in bed and my back went to just throbbing. And I said, oh my Lord. I got down on my knees and I said, Lord, I don't know whose back's hurting like this, but I rebuke that pain in the name of Jesus. And it went away. And used to, and when I was selfish, I would have been like, oh God, I'm dying, da 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 da. And I would have never once thought about someone else. But I thank God, a lot of times we don't even think about that. I think God lets us go through things that,
Intercessory prayer physically
yes,
in the natural.
because
I believe that.
yeah, because He lives in us, He lives in everyone. So therefore, if you're hurting, He might make me feel what you're feeling. And it's really amazing the things that I've learned here lately. And if you want to see someone that really shows the love of God, in my opinion, is Todd White. Me and my wife watch a couple of his videos every once in a while.
He's with the dreadlocks, right?
Yeah.
He is good. He is awesome. I've listened to him preach too.
He's just showed me, I used to be that kind of person. I was an addict. I was a druggie, a drug dealer. Like I said, I used to be violent. I loved it. We was crazy. We was mean. But through God's grace, I'm still alive. Through my grandmother and my mama and some other people, I'm sure's prayers is the reason I'm still alive. And the hand of God being on my life, because I should have died. I could tell you story after story after story where I should have died and God kept me alive, but I was too stubborn and selfish and stupid to even care. I didn't care. But once I had kids, God really opened up my eyes about what my parents were having to go through.
Yes.
The older I get, the less I make fun of my parents for the things they used to say.
Mercy and grace. Give it
I
to
find
them.
some stuff. My mom and them said, my grandmother said growing up, I remember getting on to my kids for something and then seeing my grandmother and my mom saying that to me as a kid flashback, and I'm like,
yes.
oh Lord. But anyway, if you have an issue, go to someone, a brethren or sister in Christ that will keep it confidential. And I promise you it'll help you with your issues a lot more. But I appreciate you inviting me to this. I've had fun.
Me too. So please like, share, comment. You're welcome to message me if you want to tell your testimony about this or something else. Or if you want to, if you have a prayer request, you're welcome to message me. If you don't want to put it, publicly, you can private message me if you'd like.
You can message me too. I'll be glad to pray. I love praying for people.
Micah Johnson. So we talk about, what's up in our lives. We're talking about anger. What's up in the Word? We've given scriptures. We've given biblical examples. We've given testimony. So I hope this has helped you. I pray that it's helped you. And then what's up in reality? Can something that happened that long ago, the Word that was given that long ago, apply to us today? Absolutely. That is what's up.